Welcome, everyone. This is the living room. So it's our bi-monthly session for conversation and information sharing on various topics related to sustainable jewelry practices. We cover topics from practical business tools that can be implemented in your own jewelry businesses to in-depth learning about artisanal mining, for example, like today. Today we're discussing the craft code and the new ASM Progress app and how it can help jewelers support artisanal miners. As always, we'll have a blog post summary and a recording of the session on our website. I'm Ana Brazeitite, Education Director at Christina T. Miller Sustainable Jewelry Consulting. Really glad to be here with all of you and my teammates. Christina, who's our founder and lead consultant, and Cecilia Echeverri, who's our operations director. Through our educational and consulting services, we provide strategy, guidance, and education on responsible sourcing and sustainability for the jewelry industry. You can find out more at christinatmiller.com, and you can always reach out to us with your questions and suggestions for living room topics or anything else that you'd like to see from us. I want to take a moment to thank those of you who've been able to contribute to making these sessions happen through the pay what you want option on our website, as well as to everyone for showing up for the conversation or listening to it down the road in the recording. Brief housekeeping as always, the conversation is being recorded and will be in the public realm. We encourage your participation through the chat. You can feel free to drop your questions in there. We'll hope to have a Q&A session at the end. And for the best sound quality for the recording, please make sure that your microphone is on mute unless you are speaking at the moment. And remember, of course, it's a kind community space here. Be respectful of everyone's privacy and personal space if you're using the chat. Our next living room session will be on March 17th. We're going to be taking a look at artisanal mining of diamonds from Sierra Leone. So sign up for our newsletter to receive a reminder, and you'll also receive the takeaways from this session if you're on our newsletter. And now I will hand it off to Cecilia to get us started with today's session.
Thank you, Anna. Everyone, welcome to the session. We've been wanting to talk about craft for a long time, and we're thrilled to be here with Andres Ortega. Anna and I had the pleasure of meeting him in person at the Fairmine trip back in October of last year, and his knowledge and generosity were truly made a difference in the trip, and it was incredible. So we're so glad to have Andres Ortega here with us today from the Alliance for Responsible Mining. Andres is a mining and metallurgy engineer, an analytics specialist, and has a master's in data science with over 7 years of international experience in the artisanal and small-scale mining sector, and focuses on environmental sustainability and responsible mineral supply chains. He's currently in the role of the Mining Sustainability Coordinator at the Alliance for Responsible Mining, where he's led the certification of 11 mining organizations under the Fairmine standard in Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, and has also addressed the application of the craft code in many other organizations and countries. Andres is deeply interested in researching how technology can be successfully applied for a more sustainable mining industry, and in particular for the mineral recovery of tailings as a resource to supply critical minerals for a greener future. So our topic today again is craft. We focus here at CMC a lot on fair minds. We are fans of fair minds, but today we're going to look at craft, which is an acronym, and this is a bit of a mouthful, for Code for the Mitigation of Risks in Artisanal and Small-Scale Mining, Forming Transparent and Legal Chains. So in other words, craft is an open source standard. It's voluntary in nature. It enables ASM gold miners to connect with formal markets by participating in the due diligence of their supply chain as a way towards formalization. In this way, Craft Code helps artisanal miners and international purchasers to understand each other's needs better and builds a bridge between them. So on one side, we've got the purchasers who need to comply with OECD due diligence guidance, but that code in particular is written more for us. And then on the other side, we've got the miners who can't easily sell to these formal buyers unless they have certain practices in place to get them near this guidance. Hence is where the craft code comes in to help. Ultimately, pursuing craft helps mining operations to develop their organizations and sets them on an optional path for becoming Fair Mine certified, for example. At CMC, as you all know, we support responsible ASM as a means to engage with our upstream partners to broaden the market access to the material while building trust and confidence between the producers and the supply chain, while acknowledging that everything is complex and difficult environments to work in. So without further ado, Andres, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. The floor is yours. Go for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Cecilia, for this great introduction. I'm very excited to be here. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. So, yeah, basically the idea is to have a brief conversation about the craft code and also the ASM Progress app. So I have a brief presentation. And your questions also are very welcome. The idea is to have a nice conversation regarding this kind of topics. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Please tell me if you can see it.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so yeah, basically the idea is to present an overview of the craft code, why it was created, and how it has helped small-scale miners in order to demonstrate due diligence process and also legitimacy, and how this technological app could be very beneficial also for this matter. So this is the agenda for today. A bit of context of the ASN sector worldwide, more focus on gold, but yeah, it's like a context of the sector. The craft code as a tool for the ASM sector and the downstream actors. Also to talk about a little bit about the Sustainable Mines Program at the Alliance for Responsible Mining, craft, fair mine and sustainable development goals. And at the end, the idea is to show you a demo about the app and the information that is able in this application, and also how miners can use it. So basically, here a bit context of the ASN sector worldwide. It accounts for 20% of global production of gold, and it employs 90% of the workforce. So it's like highly important in terms of the employment, artisanal and small scale miners, but at the same time, it has been characterized by informality, poor work and safety condition, improper use of and disposal of hazardous chemicals, and environmental issues, gender inequality, child labor. That's why these kind of guidelines, codes, certifications are highly important because it helps miners to reach some criteria and avoid this kind of issues. More between 4 and 5 million are women and children, and some of them encounter sexual violence, harassment in the workplace. So basically, actually, the craft code is focused on this kind of issues, right? How the mining group can identify these issues, how they can mitigate them, and how they can demonstrate that they are a legitimate mining organization. So there are some issues also regarding mercury. So unregulated small-scale mines emits over 2,000 tons of mercury per year. It's like a context of ASM sector, but in terms of gold. So let's talk about the craft. Craft is a tool for the ASM and downstream actors. So basically, it was created in 2016 by the Alliance for Responsible Mining and Resolve. And the current version covers different minerals, gold, 3T minerals, cobalt, because of this boom of the energy transition, color gemstones, very important in your sector. And we are exploring the craft code in many other minerals, region, countries, in order to see the application of the tool. And it's a tool for ASN and downstream actors to validate its eligibility to sell and source minerals. So at the beginning, or the main focus is for miners, right? To demonstrate the legitimacy, and to demonstrate that it's like a letter of presentation for miners. So the idea is that they can join formal markets. So basically, they need to demonstrate that they have identified some risks, they have mitigated, and they are committed to do better mining practices, but also is expected to be key for downstream actors to enable trade with the ASN supply chain. I would like to mention this like international recognition of the craft code by the OECD, LBMA, Responsible Geography Council, Responsible Minerals Initiative, the Alliance for Responsible Mining has made us significant work in order to have the craft code as a recognized tool for this due diligence process for the ASN sector. So here I would like to present the modules of the craft codes in order to take into account the scope. It's highly important to know the scope of these guidelines codes, because knowing the scope let us know what we can say while sourcing of this kind of minerals, right? So basically, the module 1 is about the system management. The module 2 talk about the legitimacy. Module 3 and 4 are more focused on the risks of the OECD guidance, and module 5 is aspirational module. So it involves some criteria, but they are not mandatory in the craft code. So the idea is that the mining organization reach formal markets. So basically, when a mining organization fulfills the 4 first modules, they are able to join formal markets. They are able to say, okay, this is my letter of presentation, and I'm a legitimate mining site, and I have identified the risks, I have mitigated these risks, and I am committed to do better mining practices. So basically, with the 4 first models, they are able to have this presentation. So module 1, adopting a management system. So basically, this first module is about the organizational structure, the mining group, needs to have this structure well established. We need to know who they are, the process, the production and processing characteristics, basic point of context for complaints. Also, they have been committed to develop the CAF report, and also a person responsible for the implementation of the CRAF. It's like the basic criteria on the module 1 for continuing implementing the other modules. So module 2 is about legitimacy of the mining group. So basically here we are talking about the permits to operate. So mining rights, for example, or any other document that demonstrate formalization process or demonstrate the permit to extract the mineral, environmental license, or any other document valid for the authorities, and land ownership or permits. For example, in this case is like very controversial because legitimacy in terms of regularization, formalization, depends on the legal framework of each country. So, for example, some countries have a stronger frameworks than others. So basically, in this kind of cases, we need to analyze, okay, what is the valid permit to operate in this context? Another situation, for example, there are many mining groups that they want to get formalization. But for example, in Colombia, if a mining group is inside of a mining right that is owned by a large scale mining, it's the formalization process would be quite difficult because the large scale mining owns the mining rights. So in these kind of cases, we usually help the small scale miners in order to have an agreement with these large operations. We have implemented some projects, successful projects in Colombia, where these kind of agreements were developed. In module 3, these are related to risk that the OCDE due diligence guidance consider, and there are, for example, force of child, forced or compulsory labor, torture or cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment, gross rights violation and abuses. For example, what happened here is that if we identify this kind of risk on the ground, it requires immediate disengagement. The mining group, let's say, can continue with the implementation of the CRAF code, because these are like very high risk in the mining site. And also, if these are a conflicted area and high risk, conflicted affected area and high risk areas, we analyze other kinds of issues like war crimes or other serious violation of international humanitarian law. Mine sites and transportation routes are not controlled by illegal groups, or illegal taxation or extortion of money or minerals. We need to analyze this other kind of situation. It's a big challenge to analyze this on the ground. We at ARM have developed many protocols. We need to understand the region, the type of mining, the culture of the mining sites, in order to support miners in this kind of risk. And module 4 are other risks that if they are identified on the ground, the mine has the opportunity to develop a mitigation plan. So these risks are related to direct or indirect support to public or private security forces, that illegally tax, extort, or control its operation, hiring individuals or a unit of security forces that are known to have been responsible for gross humanitarian rights abuses, transparent payments, payments to government of all taxes, and bribery and money laundering. So basically, if the mining organization identifies this kind of risks on the ground, a mitigation plan could be designed and also implement in order to overcome this kind of risk. And the module 5 is aspirational, it's not mandatory. So in this module 5, as you maybe can see in the last modules, craft code doesn't consider environmental or health and safety topics. But in this module 5 are considered this kind of matters. So basic safety rules, personal protective equipment, first aid and basic health services. The mining organization is accepted or integrated into the existing communities, coexisting between mining and other activities in terms of the use of land and water and basic wastewater treatment system. So this is like a basic criteria regarding environmental and health and safety categories, issues. But if you can see, they are not mandatory, they are aspirational. And the idea is obviously that the mine could work on these aspects too, but they are not mandatory. And for example, this is a big difference between the fair mine standard that is a certification. So fair mine standard, this kind of topics and even others are mandatory in order to get the certification. That's why it's important to know the scope of the craft code and also the other standards like fair mine. I would like to mention something about the Sustainable Mines Program. In Alliance for Responsible Mining, we understand that the ASM sector is really a world. We have many kinds of artisanal and small scale organizations. So basically, it's progressive pathway. So the idea is that the mining organizations start implementing the craft code as a starting point, and they have the chance to continue with a fair mine standard and implement on the ground other criteria that consider communities, environmental protection, and health and safety condition. But at the end, what we really look for is that mining organization reach sustainable development goals. That is like the end. The goal is not to get a mine certified, but that the mining organization implement very good mining practices and take into account the sustainable development goals. So how to engage with these mining organizations? So we have three different ways. You can sponsor a mine, purchase credits, or source gold. This is very well defined in the fair mine scheme, but in the craft scheme, the market unit is working on this like business model, because what happened is that in the fair mine standard, for example, the miners who are certified receive a premium to invest in the progress improvement. But in craft code, there are not this like a scheme. So we are working on that to see how could be the premium that a mine that reach craft criteria could receive in order to continue to motivate them to do better mining practices and hopefully to join fair mine certification. That's about the craft code, the information that I wanted to share with you about the craft code. Now, I would like to mention something about the ASM Progress app. But before, I would like to invite you, if you want to know more about the craft code, we have a course in our online learning platform. Here is the link I will share on the chat box at the end of the session if you want to go deeper in this standard. And basically, the idea is like all the information could be storage in the ASM Progress app. So this is an app that that works as a database system for mining organizations, so they can upload on this app all the evidence for the assessments, and also you can see the improvement of any mining organization. If you can see what is improvement in the craft criteria, in the fair mine criteria, or in sustainability criteria. So the idea is that all the information is in this app. So I would like to show you. I would like to show you the app. So basically, this is the app. We are going to deliver access for.
We're still seeing the slides, Andres.
Sorry. I need to change the window. It's okay now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, basically, thanks. So basically, this is the app. The idea in this app is like the mining organization could have all the information here, and this information could be used for different actors. Right? We are we are working on this app, and the idea is that different actors of the supply chain have access to this information. For example, this is the main dashboard, some pictures of the mining organization and basic information regarding the number of workers, the mineral that is extracted, that is mined, description of the mining organization, the profile, and the processing method. And this dashboard, this is like the most important, I think, because this is the assessment that we do on mining organizations. So we can see in terms of, this is the full assessment. If we want to see the craft, the fair mine assessment, we can do it, but this is the full assessment. So for example, if we can see in terms of legitimacy, for example, this mine has 96% of fulfillment, and environmental topics, social, organizational, traceability, which is highly important, working conditions. So we, in this assessment, can identify the gap and the performance of any mining group. And if we want to go deeper, for example, in environmental terms, if we want to go deeper, why this mining organization reached 85%, we could go through the platform and look the environmental criteria that were assessed on the ground, and also why this criteria was assessed by, as for example, in this case, medium. We have the observation here, and also evidence that support this score. So in evidence, we have the chance to upload documents, pictures of the mining site. For example, in environmental topics, we usually upload pictures, but the idea is that the mining organization could upload the information by themselves too. We are working on that. We are disclosing this information to mining organization because at the end of the day, they are the owner of the information. So we have here also the performance regarding craft. Module 1, Module 2, Module 3, 4, and 5. That's why it's highly important to know what each module considers. So basically, this is like the performance of this mining organization, and also regarding fair mine. We have the performance regarding fair mine. So basically, this is like baseline, but we, in order to bridge this gap, the mine organization needs to implement some activities, improvement activities. So we have also this dashboard here. This is a new mine, and in the sustainability plan, they are like they are in 10% of this sustainability plan, and also the baseline is updated. So in the green, dark green, we have the initial assessment, and in the other green, we have the current assessment. For example, here in health and safety, the initial assessment was 71%, but now with the activities that the mining organization has implemented on the ground, they have reached 77%. So if we want to see these activities, we have also the chance to go to the activities module and check what was the improvement, and also with evidence like documentation, photographic records, and this kind of evidence. So basically, this is like the ASM Progress app. We have identified many improvement opportunities in the platform. The idea is in the future that in the main dashboard, you could see some ESG, environmental, social, and governance indicators here in the main dashboard. But I think it's a very good starting point, and now we are like making this transfer to mining organization for them to upload the information and to have like a more real follow-up in the mining site. So basically that was I wanted to show you, to present. So if you have any question regarding the app, regarding the craft code, are very, very welcome.
This was super interesting, Andres. Thank you so much. I do have a question myself. We do have some questions coming up, so it's great. And I'll just ask my question. Andres, if when one of these organizations starts this process, let's say they're at 0, and let's say that achieving fair mind is 100, where does craft show come in? Like at what percentage or proportion of the whole fair mind standard would craft sort of bring them to?
As you can see, we have like they are a complementary standard, right? So this is the full assessment, but if we can, we have this like assessment by craft and also by fair mind. But if we want to focus just on the craft, we have the craft performance graphed here, right? So this is like the graph that describe the craft performance. So basically, for example, in this mining organization, they have 100% module 1, 90% module 2, 81% module 3. So basically, if we want to focus on craft, we focus on this graph. And if we want to focus on short mine, we focus on this graph. What happened is that craft code was developed after fair mine standard. So basically, some criteria in the craft code are also in the fair mine standard. So that's the point.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you, Andres. I've learned so much already as well. I'm really glad to be sharing this information with all of you as well. I wanted to take like a tiny step back and think about the idea of what this app allows for, and how this type of verification is different than a one-time or annual audit. We also have here in the guests, Benjamin Clare from DataStake, which is how this app was built. And Benjamin, we were wondering if you wanted to also come on and give us a little bit of that context about how this verification method is different than some of the certification standards that we might be used to. And then Andres, if you would like to, add any thoughts afterward as well.
Yes, so
Or Andres, go ahead and we'll see if Benjamin's available.
oh, sorry, Benjamin.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, so basically it's different. The idea is that the audit is annual, right? So the third party audit is annual, so they go to the ground and they do the assessment, and they have the performance of the mine each 12 months. But the idea with this app is that the mining organizations have the chance to upload information regularly and to show the improvement, the progressive improvement, because at the end of the day, the Sustainable Mines Program is a progressive improvement, and even fair mine standard is progressive. No, we have a fair mine standard in year 0, 1, 3, 6, and 9. So basically, it's a progressive improvement that this app allows miners to show this kind of improvement activities that they are implementing on the ground, and upload the evidence, the photographic records of these improvements. So they are complementary, I think.
That's great. So we're able to then receive information more than just through the audit.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Sorry, Benjamin here, and I don't want to.
Benjamin.
I'm glad. Sorry, I'm on the move now. I'm glad that Andres spoke first after your question, because it is all about the great logic, standards, and efforts that ARM have been doing. All we've done is a system with building this into a digital system, and I think Andres has done a great job explaining the entirety of the application as it is now. Especially considering that, as I remember, he was not necessarily himself involved in the early stages of the development of the application. So he's done a very great job at explaining it, and it was actually quite nice to see. I would like to, just from our perspective, and I think ARM shares that perspective. What is important is that all the great work that ARM is doing, represented in the app and outside the app, can serve as a bridge of communication with jewelry companies, with gold refining companies, with international stakeholders interested in supporting those communities. From an engagement perspective, it's with ARM. It's about discussing with ARM how some companies might support the work of ARM or express an interest in this information, in this work, in supporting individual corrective actions, supporting improvement plans of the kind that Andres was talking about. And then if that interest materializes, there's obviously a lot more flexibility that could be invested and built into the application. In particular, improved interfaces, creating interfaces specifically for jewelry companies to extract dedicated dashboards. So for example, the application, as you see it, is very much designed for ARM use, very much focused on recording individual ARM activities. Maybe the nature of the dashboards that a jewelry company or a gold buyer would need might be different for their communication, so different interfaces. And also, as Andres touched on, there's an element that is really critical to expand on, and that is the incorporation of the mining organizations as users, which would mean creating some extra forms and interfaces so that they can contribute information themselves to improve the quality and the consistency and the regularity of feedback on the ground, so that more local feedback can be incorporated. So purely from an engineering software perspective, it's a bit more investment. But more importantly, I think in the first step needs to be a clearer support from interested participants, interested industry actors, a clearer collaboration between you and ARM, so that ARM can confirm what is of interest to the industry in particular.
Super interesting how the app would serve different audiences. That's fascinating.
I agree. And Andres, is this something that might be in the future, a more jeweler-facing dashboard of the application, where jewelers would be able to fully gather that whatever information they would want to share with their customers?
Yeah, actually that's the idea, right? That the app could be useful for miners, for different actors of the supply chain, journalists, refiners. So basically, that's the idea. We have been working on that with the software developer team. But yeah, we go step by step. I think it's a very good starting point. And yeah, we are receiving all this feedback in order to improve the platform and also the accessibility for other actors.
That's great. We've got another question over here by Lori. Andres, how do miners learn about craft code so they get, interested, and what's the outreach you guys are doing?
Actually, we have supports many small scale miners in the application of the craft code in Peru, in Colombia, and also in Africa, project in Madagascar. So it's very interesting because some miners are like committed to start implementing these kind of practices, and they know that this letter of presentation is highly important for them too to reach formal markets. So basically, we have many interested minds to continue implementing the craft code, and there are many challenges on the ground too, because many reasons. One of them, culture in different countries, and also the legal framework. But basically, the idea is to adapt the code to different like territories and regions and also minerals. But miners have received very well this craft code because it's a letter of presentation for them to reach and to demonstrate also legitimacy.
Thank you, Andres. Could you actually expand a little bit more on this idea of adaptability? We learned that the craft code is an open source standard, meaning that it can be implemented and added on to. For example, we know that Virtue Gem has been able to use the craft code for artisanal color gemstone mining operations. Planet Gold has been able to adapt it as well. They've also added on mercury-free requirements and certain environmental rehabilitation requirements. So this is all possible because of that open source nature of the code. And could you just tell us a little bit more about how that allows it to be adaptable to different regions and different materials that are being mined and different types of situations?
Yes, of course. As many like other guidelines or standards, they consider like general criteria, but each region countries has its own characteristics. For example, now last year we worked on the standardization of the craft code to Brazil. And the idea is this year to start working with Garimpos piloting this craft code there. So we have the criteria on the craft code, but we need to have very clear what evidence we need to require or the miners need to meet in order to demonstrate that any risk has been identified and also mitigate. So depending on the context, this kind of evidence could vary. And also, if we talk about regularization, it's a very good example because, as I mentioned before, legal frameworks in different contexts are very, very different. So we need to adapt these kind of criteria on the ground and the territories. And for example, in the Planet Gold project, they consider that was highly important to add some additional criteria. If you remember, the module 5 was aspirational, right? But with this link with Planet Gold, they consider, okay, no, let's work on some environmental criteria that are also mandatory. So, okay, let's do it and pilot the craft code with these additional Planet Gold criteria on the ground. So it's very beneficial because it is structured like very it is structured in a well manner the code and also consider additional criteria to be assessed on the ground.
That's great. Christina is sharing in the chat. She's in a space that's a little loud right now. She says, Andres, the regional adaptability is amazing. It is so difficult to know it all. This also helps address some criticisms of increased transparency that it isn't possible. You are showing that it is challenging, complex, but possible. So that's a really great takeaway from that. Everybody else, feel free to drop, if you have any other questions, drop them in the chat. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on as well is a little more practical and maybe forward looking. So down the road, when jewelers are able to add this source of gold into their sourcing, how do they describe the miners' involvement in the craft program? You know, pretty simple kind of logistical question. When we're a fair mine licensed brand, for example, you know, we say we use gold from a fair mine certified mine. How would we talk about gold sourced from a craft assessed mine?
That's a very good question, because that's why I mentioned the scope, right? The scope of the craft code. So basically, knowing the scope, you know the scope of the fair mine standard, so you know how to communicate that what is a fair mine mining organization, right? But with the craft mine, we need to take into account the scope that is more focused on this risk that the OCDE due diligence guidance has. But for example, we need to be transparent. We can't say that a craft mine is working on reducing carbon footprint, for example, because maybe there are more complex like topics, and only in module 5 they are like trying to do these good mining practices in terms of environment, in terms of health and safety conditions. So we need to be transparent. We need to know we need to have in mind the scope of the craft code, and knowing that, we are able to communicate to customers the real scope of the craft mines. That is different from fair mine mines, but it's a very good starting point. And the idea is that they continue with the path, right? They continue implementing the fair mine standard.
So I guess as I'm kind of thinking of what you just said through the lens of, our consulting work, for example, we do, like you were saying, often focus in on continued improvement. And maybe that is how it can be framed, if down the road you are able to use gold from the sources, it's about the fact that you are engaging in the artisanal mining space in order to support that continued improvement. And then we would have the information from the app that would allow us to be really specific about any other information that we would want to provide. Cecilia, did you have something to add or ask?
No, I was, because when I remembered when we were at the trip, we had so many questions regarding craft. So I urge, everybody here to ask questions. No question is too, insignificant or big to ask. Like we have Andres here, an expert in the topic. Anybody have any other questions?
I actually see Maddie was circling back to the question about how frequently is the assessment recalculated. And so if I understood that correctly, maybe I'll rephrase it, and Andres, you can confirm that I understood that the assessment itself is still done annually, but in between the annual assessments, the miners have the opportunity to provide further information and upload documentation so that the documents are updated as regularly as they choose. Is that correct?
Yes, and actually, we have to take into account that there is a mitigation plan that considers the risks identified in the module 4, and the mining organization needs to fulfill this or to mitigate this risk within the next 6 months. So the craft report needs to be updated at the first 6 months with the mitigation of these risks identified in the module 4.
We have a question here from Russell. How do inspections of a mining site get conducted to assess the adherence to the criteria, Andres?
How do inspection of mining site get conducted to assess having never visited? Okay. So basically, in ARM, we have our know-how. So, but basically, the idea is to assess each criteria on the ground. So we contact first the mining organization that is interested in applying this craft code, and we go to the ground. We analyze first the territory. We see if the tool that we have could be implemented on the ground, or we need to adapt before going there. And we assess each criteria. Each module has specific criteria, and we assess each criteria, and we have support evidence for each criteria too. So we recollect this information, and we assess each criteria, and at the end we have like these quantitative results, and at the same time the criteria that the mining organization need, the criteria that need to be improved. That's like a general way that I could describe this work on the ground.
Mhm.
But it
Okay.
involves, sorry, I
Go ahead.
it involves some interviews with miners, with community, in some cases with local representatives. So basically, it's a integral assessment that we do on the ground in order to support these mining organizations.
Awesome. We do have questions coming through, Andres, so maybe we'll just pick up the pace a little bit, although it's 1 o'clock, Anna.
Well, actually, I was thinking because quite a few came
Yeah.
in, and I wanted to try to get to them in order. Since we are at time, I'm thinking let's do this one more question, and then we could have Andres maybe answer some of these in written format, and we can share them in our we'll list each question and Andres's answer in our blog. How about we do that way?
Okay.
So let's just go back to this one from Felix. It said, Andres, you give the 3 pathways for organizations and traders to get fair mine gold, but how does a mine that would like to implement the standards start the process? And someone added to that question, and how much is the cost for the miner or the mine?
Let me see the question. Some 3 pathways for organization and traders to get certified gold, but how does a mine that would like to implement the standard start the process? Okay, so there are like different ways. In some cases, mining organizations usually have heard about the process, so they contact us, and we start with a previability process, analyzing some basic information of the mining group, and if we consider and the mine consider that there is a potential to continue implementing the program, we start with the integral mining assessment on the ground. Or sometimes, for example, we have some projects that finance, for example, the implementation of the craft code of 10 mining organizations in a specific region. So basically, we contact some mining organizations that we have in our pipeline, or we contact governments. We work together with different institutions to find this mining organization. We present the program, we present the benefits, but also the commitments, and yeah, that's the way that we start working with this mining organization. But what is the most important here is that we need the commitment of the mining group. If the mining group has this commitment, we can continue with them, and we also motivate other mines to continue this path.
Great. Okay. Yeah, we are 3 minutes over our hour already. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So Andres, if it's okay with you, we'll follow up with you with these remaining questions because they're all great. I'm wondering some of the same things, and we'll wrap it up for today. So thank you so much for everyone for being here. Thank you, Benjamin, for jumping in as well. And of course, Andres, for all of your wonderful information sharing.
Thank you everyone for being here.
Great.
Thank you very much
Take
for
care.
the invitation.
Have a great weekend.